Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. As we continue with Part 7, the Lohans and Saints of Buddhism, from the Adepts in the Eastern Esoteric Tradition, by Manly Palmer Hall, Part 2, the Arhats of Buddhism. The Lohans and Saints of Buddhism. The title Arhat, meaning worthy, is equivalent to Adept, as this is used in the Western Esoteric Tradition, while the word has been more or less loosely applied when referring to those who have accomplished the Noble Eightfold Path. An Arhat is actually one who has attained the internal experience of the state of reality. The term was in use prior to the advent of Buddhism, but without the implication of internal enlightenment. Like the word adept in non-mystical literature, it signified a specialist or one proficient in some mental or physical art. In Buddhism, the Arhats are great sages or monks who are approaching bodhisattvahood. In fact, even the Buddhas themselves can properly be called Arhats. There are a number of instances in which laymen attain to this distinction through some extraordinary action which reveals apperception of universal law. Popular veneration has caused the term to be applied to illustrious teachers of old times and to the disciples of the Buddha who carried his doctrine to distant places. The Chinese word Lohan is usually considered synonymous with Arhat. Among those spiritually advanced persons who belong to the human life stream must be included the Arhats or Sthaviras, the Pratyeka Buddhas, and the Lohans. The Hinayana Buddhists are inclined to regard the attainment of nirvana by a Pratyeka Buddha, a non-teaching saint, as a state of spiritual finality, the end of all personal consciousness, and the complete absorption of the sattva, self, into the universe reality. The Mahayana Buddhists hold a contrary opinion. To them, nirvana is a condition or state of realization by which certain limitations of understanding natural to the unenlightened have been overcome. To these northern mystics, the evolutionary processes of the world are eternal, and even the Buddhas, though exalted beyond ordinary mortals, must continue to grow and unfold through all time and space. From illustrated actions of the Sakyamuni Buddha, Buddha revealing the doctrine to his principal disciples. A Pratyeka Buddha is an exalted saint who, in a previous incarnation, had been the disciple of Buddha, but who had not been able to attain the nirvana during the lifetime of his master. Therefore, this highly advanced disciple must be reborn at a time when there is no Buddha incarnate, and illumination must be accomplished by solitary meditation. Such sages remain aloof from all concerns of the flesh and make no effort to bestow enlightenment. The Northern School regards this self-centered cultivation of the spiritual virtues as a distinct departure from the spirit of the teachings of the Buddha. The Enlightened One gave the example of unselfish service, and the Bodhisattvas inclined their hearts and minds to the requirements of all men of all faiths who stood in need of internal security. There is a legend by the Mahayana mystics that before his death, Buddha commissioned 4 illustrious Sthaviras to remain in the world to protect his doctrine until the coming of the Maitreya Buddha. There are references to Arhats in the earliest commentaries, and these servants of the Buddha's teachings protected and expanded the philosophy through succeeding ages. The Buddha Kasyapa was the immediate predecessor of the Buddha Gautama, and it is believed that this ancient sage sits in contemplation in a cave within the heart of a great mountain. When the Buddha Maitreya comes, he will journey with a vast procession of Arhats and Lohans to this mountain. The rocks and earth will remove themselves, and the entire assembly will see the venerable Kasyapa meditating upon the mysteries of reality. According to the Chinese, certain sages who at various times in history had attained to the higher grades of the Buddhist esoteric system are entitled to be known as Lohans. In the 10 steps of the ideal scale of internal evolution, the Lohan occupies the second step just below that of the Arhat. The home of the Lohans is said to be the Western paradise of Amitabha. In this usage, the Western paradise certainly represents the school or assembly of the mysteries. The Lohans are especially referred to as the sweet-voiced because of their skill in chanting the mantras with magical effect. It is believed that any devout Buddhist in meditation, if he can attain perfect inward silence, can still hear the songs of the Lohans, especially at dawn. Each of the Lohans has a retinue of attendant saints, numbering from 500 to 1600. There are several circles of Lohans. The smallest circle consists of 16, in Japan 18, and these are the ones most frequently represented in Buddhist art. There is also a circle of 500 Lohans. In the larger monasteries of China and Japan, there is often an elaborate hall or a large room set aside for the 500 saints. Each is represented by a statue depicting the Lohan with a shaven head, long ears, and a more or less grim facial expression. Every type of physiognomy may be found in these collection of images. In the pagoda of Payunpi near Peking, the images of the Lohans give the impression of a convocation of monks. High under the roof of the building sits one solitary saint. It has been suggested that he may represent a sanctified Marco Polo, the traveler who visited many Chinese cities in the 13th century. The traditional appearance now associated with each Lohan is based upon the works of 2 or 3 artists of the Tang dynasty. They in turn drew their inspiration from the indefinite description to be found in the old Buddhist records. The Lohans have special appeal to the Buddhist laity and as a result have been invested with a quantity of esoteric lore. This process of secularization has obscured much of the original symbolism so that in the popular mind the entire subject is sadly confused. It is not necessary to the present purpose to identify the different Lohans. Each has a definite story to explain his conversion to Buddhist philosophy, and most of them are accredited with the ability to perform miracles. One is represented in the act of snapping his fingers to indicate the rapidity with which illumination came to him. Another was not converted until he was 100 years old, and thereafter became young and happy. Still another, born dull and stupid, attained such proficiency in mystical arts that he could fly through the air and change his appearance at will. In the old scrolls, the group of 500 esteemed ancients presents a delightful panorama of whimsical saints. Some wear broad-brimmed hats, others, completely oblivious to their associates, are warming their tea over a charcoal brazier or trimming their fingernails in quiet dignity. Each of these distinguished persons is justly celebrated for his contribution to the modes of internal knowing. Some dwelt in busy cities, others in distant mountain places. Some governed states and provinces, others lived and died in beggardom. One was of outstanding virtue, another was an ardent criminal. A few were handsome according to the standard of their time, others were crippled and deformed. But each in his own light had experienced in some way the benediction of truth within. Thus consecrated and ordained by the light in his own heart, each had gone forth to minister according to understanding and opportunity. These serving saints were the blessed messengers of the law, and together they signified that no human being was incapable of improvement through discipline and realization. Non-Buddhists are inclined to view the Lohans as a collection of rascals, rendered smug in their various delinquencies by a series of formulas. It is a little difficult for followers of other faiths to develop a spiritual sympathy for a dour old gentleman engrossed in the amusing task of sewing a button onto his robe with a length of snarled thread, especially while this process is being regarded with rapt attention by a group of reverent disciples. Only those with considerable philosophical insight can understand that the venerable saint is devoting the full majesty of his intellect to experiencing universal law by sewing on a button thoroughly and completely, and to the full elimination of all irrelevant thought and emotion. At the council convened by King Kanishka, 500 Arhats assembled to purify the scripture. The later circle of Lohans may be associated with this peculiarly significant number. Those who feel that the spiritual heroes of other religions make a better appearance than the Buddhist Lohans should remember that the saints of early Christendom were also an eccentric lot if considered only in terms of externals. According to the reports which have survived relating to the Great Council at Nicaea, the bishops and elders who were to establish Christianity on an imperishable foundation did not exactly resemble the pictures of them now circulated. Some were almost naked with matted hair and beard, others were dressed in the skins of animals, and nearly all were gaunt and wan from penance and privation. Some were so feeble that they had to be carried, and each had a disposition consistent with the circumstances of his own life. A few were meek, some were pacifistic, many were argumentative, and a number were intensely belligerent. From the best that can be learned, all were illiterate. A plump Lohan contentedly boiling his rice presents a picture no more remarkable than St. Simeon's stylite sitting on the top of a lofty column in the desert, to prevent worldly contamination. St. Simeon is said to have remained perched on this lofty seat for nearly half a lifetime. While the Lohans are unfamiliar and perhaps slightly humorous, they have much in common with the ascetics of other religions. In esoteric Buddhism, the Lohans become the personification of the extensions of wisdom through the numerous conditions of mortal existence. It will require years of patient study to discover the true worth of the fables and myths now associated with these Eastern saints. Actually, they were initiates of the great Asiatic mystery schools. Their purported lives are really veiled accounts of their initiations. Considered together, they personify the garment or outer form of the Buddhist hierarchy. This is why figures of the Buddha with his robes composed of the bodies of his Lohans are occasionally found. These Eastern adepts belong to a concept of learning with which Westerners are entirely unfamiliar. A clue to the fuller meaning of the Lohan idea may be gathered from Zen Buddhism of Japan. The Zen monks are devoted to projects identical to those attributed to the Lohans, whom they resemble in appearance and temperament. The Zen immortals were supposed to have been engaged in such useful pursuits as putting frames of wind on paintings of air. One may be opening the gateless gate and another may be closing the doorless door. A pensive scholar may be depicted reading intently from a blank piece of paper. A happy-faced saint carries a long broom with which to sweep up himself. Should these various industries prove too arduous, the saint may have several disciples to assist him. These he instructs by disciplines called the unteachable teachings. To emphasize some important phases of the doctrine, a Zen master may point his finger at nothing and then box his disciples' ears for looking in the direction that the finger indicated. In a quiet corner, an old philosopher is represented holding his breath with stern resolution because he has just inhaled the cosmos. Later he will relax and slowly exhale the 33 worlds. The average Occidental may be excused for his inability to grasp the implications of this intricate and abstract doctrinal conception. The title Lohan has long been bestowed upon the initiates of those secret rites and disciplines which form the spiritual essence of Buddhistic philosophy. Like all mystical traditions, this hidden doctrine is too attenuated to be captured and held in the writings or opinions of Western intellectuals who have made but a superficial study of Eastern metaphysics. Naturally, these Occidentals deny the existence of that which their own training and prejudice forbid them to examine. It is impossible to give serious thought to the elaborate structure of Mahayana Buddhism, with its intricate symbolism and profound metaphysical convictions, without sensing the existence of some inner meaning more profound and more important than the teachings given to the uninitiated and unqualified laity. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.